This week is the third anniversary of one of the most consequential Supreme Court decisions in U.S. history, the Dobbs decision.
Which, of course, is the decision that overturned Roe v. Wade.
And I'll never forget where I was when I heard the news, because obviously social media just erupted with outrage and everyone like crying and sharing, like being angry. But I had a friend staying with me at the time whose family is super conservative. And so I remember they were calling her in like happy tears and celebrating. And it was just like the juxtaposition of the two sides was like a lot to witness.
No, it was like such an intense time. And it was kind of crazy that change started happening so immediately. So overnight, 11 states stopped providing any abortion care. And within 100 days, 15 states had stopped. And that's also when we started seeing like abortion deserts in the South kind of pop up, where there were just huge areas where women couldn't get the care that they needed.
And that's remained probably the biggest obstacle for women. An average of 165,000 women now have to travel to another state to get an abortion every year. And states where abortion is limited have higher rates of maternal and infant mortality.
And since the laws around abortion were returned to the states through this decision, governors kind of became the most powerful political figures in shaping what this looks like in their states. And since Trump's anti-abortion strategists have reportedly said that he's looking for a way to enact a national ban, it's notable that 23 governors band together to join a coalition called the Reproductive Freedom Alliance.
And the Reproductive Freedom Alliance, or RFA, was convened by California's Gavin Newsom, and all 23 are Democrats. And we're about to speak to the executive director, so we'll let her tell you about the specifics. But broadly, Alliance governors are strengthening reproductive rights by using every tool they have, from executive actions to budgets to legislative reforms.
And it's just wild how many women are affected by this. Since the fall of Roe v. Wade, 36 million women now live in states hostile to essential reproductive health care.
19 states have currently banned or extremely limited abortion. It might technically be legal, like in Florida, South Carolina, and Iowa, but only until 6 weeks of pregnancy, which is before a lot of women even know they're pregnant.
And Trump has several options in how he could enact a national ban. So he could go through Congress, which would probably be the most unlikely, even though he has a majority in the House and Senate. He could also attempt to eliminate medical abortion, which accounts for 2/3 of abortions around the country, by ordering the FDA to rescind approval of mifepristone, which seems like the most likely, I guess, since the FDA is controlled by RFK and we know that they're besties.
Trump has one other option in his arsenal. He could also decide to enforce the Comstock Act of 1873, which bans the mailing and receiving of abortion-related medication or even contraception. And it's considered a zombie law because no previous administration has ever enforced it, but Trump advisors say he sees it as a backdoor.
And even without a national ban, Trump has said that under this Dobbs decision as it stands, states can monitor pregnancies and prosecute women for obtaining abortions. And we all remember in 2016 when he said, quote, there has to be some form of punishment for women who get abortions if they're outlawed.
Yeah, he was also the guy that bragged about overturning Roe v. Wade and says he wants to be remembered as the most pro-life president ever. So with this backdrop, we are very interested in speaking to Christina Chang, who's the executive director of the Reproductive Freedom Alliance. So, Christina, this week is the 3-year anniversary of the Dobbs decision. Can you kind of help us understand what is going on in the country right now regarding abortion? What are the latest threats and the challenges?
What we've seen is this dangerous and really inequitable patchwork of access and restrictions across the country. 13 states have total bans on abortion, and another 7 or so ban abortion, oftentimes before people even realize that they're pregnant. And so what we see now is that 1 in 3 women of reproductive age either live in a state where abortion is banned or nearly totally banned. And we're seeing not just that this is like a continual erosion, an attempt to erode access, and in lots of other ways as well. And so I think that the biggest threats or the things that keep me up at night, I'll name 5. First and foremost are restrictions on medication abortion. And it's clearly being targeted as a way to further limit access to services. The second piece is civil and criminal penalties against providers, patients, and people who are helping patients. Related to that, I think, is also the potential use and misuse of personal data and information that could identify providers or patients and helpers. It could be travel data. It could be research data. We've even seen state-sanctioned data breaches, most recently in California, when the Trump administration released Medicaid data to the Department of Homeland Security. probably for immigration purposes, but we can easily see this being applied to the reproductive health arena. We're seeing increased strains and threats to providers. So mostly in what I'm calling our surge states. These are states that are serving people not just within their borders, for people who are coming to their states for services. And, it's really just putting such a pressure on capacity for that workforce. And we sort of see this increase in violence and intimidation and harassment. Most recently, in the tragic events in Minnesota, among the list of other people that this shooter was targeting were abortion providers and clinics. And the last threat I think that we're tracking is threats to funding, right? And it's not just to abortion, but it's for contraception and it's for preventative services. We're seeing more attempts to defund Planned Parenthood. We're seeing freezes on Title X, which is the nation's family planning program, and we're seeing a whole host of different potential cuts being debated for Medicaid. It's a full-on assault, I think, on our fundamental freedom to be able to choose.
It's rare to have such a big coalition of governors come together to work on anything. So tell us, how did it even start? What was the origin?
It's interesting because the origin story is really that all these governors, I think, after the fall of Roe, were trying to come up with different strategies and ideas about how to protect their providers, how to maintain access, how to bolster their workforce. But they were doing it all within their own states, and there wasn't sort of this sharing of information, and everyone was kind of starting from scratch. And rather than doing it in isolation, they started actually, a few governor's offices started calling each other, finding the right person who was working on that, and realized just how valuable it would be if they were able to sort of do this across a number of different states, right? And hear about their approaches, share language. And so that's one of the things that sort of sparked this idea of creating this amazing network of governor's offices. We are privately funded through foundations and individuals. There is no state funding involved in it at all.
We read about governors stockpiling mifepristone.
So there was a Supreme Court case of the FDA versus the Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine. And that was where we were seeing sort of the first volley, right, to try to restrict mifepristone. We ended up across multiple states accumulating 350,000 doses of medication abortion. Luckily, that didn't have to come to pass. The Supreme Court did not rule on the case, and it was dismissed.
So we were looking into all the avenues that Trump has if he wants to enact a national abortion ban. What is the mood in the alliance? Do you think he's going to do one of these things? And is that kind of the worst case scenario that you're preparing for?
It's hard to speculate on what they're going to be able to do. We are gaming through all of these different scenarios and doing some planning around that. And the really powerful thing about these governors is that they have, they're pledged to use every tool that they have at their disposal to be able to ensure that we're protecting and advancing access to your reproductive health services and defending your rights. We're seeing moves by Congress and the FDA that is politicizing mifepristone, right? And they're trying to call into question the safety of mifepristone, which has had decades of studies in, hundreds of peer-reviewed articles that have, proven time and time again that mifepristone is safe, it's effective, and yet we see sort of these politically motivated attempts by anti-abortion activists to use junk science and political pressure to try to undermine that trust. And so I think that's something that we are really trying to push back against.
We have seen the federal government kind of take a murky way in enforcing their agenda recently and kind of intervening in the way governors are running their states. So are you predicting some type of showdown or something with the governors and the federal government?
5 months ago, I had a very different sort of answer to this, right? Because the moves that the administration is making has defied precedents, right? There are things that we have never seen before. I think that governors are seeing that there is a real possibility of them being targeted. We have, 23 governors representing, over half of the U.S. population.
We do know, though, that pro-abortion states are taking on a pretty big burden of out-of-state patients. Is the RFA kind of helping address that at all? How hands-on do you guys get with the problems that people are facing?
That's a great question. So these alliance states have become safe havens, right, for so many people, and they're absorbing patients from across the country due to bans in their own homes. And for states like Illinois, New Mexico, North Carolina, Kansas, they're seeing a disproportionate share just because of the geography. New Mexico is seeing a ton of patients coming in from Texas. 69% of the abortions that are performed in New Mexico are for out-of-state patients. Illinois is like dead center in in terms of like as an access state around a sea of banned states. The sheer number in Illinois, I mean, they had seen 35,000 patients in 1 year coming to Illinois. So that creates enormous stress on clinics, on staff, and on the infrastructure. And I think that what the Alliance does is actually help to germinate those different ideas and help them sort of say like, okay, we've tried this in Illinois. Is this something that we can stand up in New Mexico? Abortion care is time sensitive, right? And so the sooner you are able to access services, the simpler it is, the fewer complications you have. So time is of the essence.